Hello everyone, I'm Mike Cannici and welcome to Hometown Heroes, and we are joined again with part 2 of our segment with the legendary voice of high school sports, the coach, George Demaio. And Coach, I want to thank you for coming on again.
No problem, Mike. Glad to be here.
Part 1 was a lot of fun. So Coach, let's get right into it. I believe you said in part 1 it was around maybe 91, 92, where you guys finally brought high school sports to WELI, I believe.
AVZ first.
AVZ first, and then eventually WELI. Right. So talk about what the first year was like doing sports for that station.
First year, AVZ 92, it was a lot of fun. That was a memorable year for games. I still have a highlight cassette of the games that year, and I remember Cheshire being so good, and Brantford was very good that year. They had a memorable game, which I'll never forget. And I've had some unique times in radio. Back then, in 92, not only doing the games on Friday nights, but mostly a lot of Saturday games back then. Because Hamden used to play Saturday games. Brantford played a lot of Saturday games, so I did their games.
There's not lights for everybody then.
No, back then. But my two sons, who were still in school, actually helped me do the games. And what happened was, when I had an afternoon game to do, I had to leave the game at halftime because the station at that time had me do an afternoon sports talk show on WELI, like that came on at 4 o'clock. So I couldn't be at the end of the game. So what I had to do is bring my sons with me. They would do color the first half, and then I'd have to leave them, and they would set up the equipment, break it down, do the play-by-play in color, and then bring the equipment back to me. They had to do that for some of those games that first year. I'll never forget it.
Wow. And how fun was that for you to be able to do these games with your sons?
That's a dream. I mean, they're both sports guys. And both played sports.
Your son Jeff's quite the comedian, because he would be on your Saturday morning show. And
he still is.
Yeah, and he would always, be cracking jokes, and he was very witty with the things he would say. Yeah.
My son Jeff, I tell him even today, he's a teacher. He is a history teacher at North Haven High School, been there for 20 years. And he could probably do stand-up comedy.
Oh, yeah.
He could probably do stand-up. And
he belongs in radio in some capacity.
He does. I think he does. And I have him on occasionally when I want a good laugh. I say, Jeff. And he used to kid me. He still kids me when he comes on the Saturday morning about things. But he did the games. He actually did the play-by-play. Matt did the color back then. Actually, Matt has done some play-by-play as well for me in all the sports. Matt, even today, if I need him, I'll say, Matt, I really need you to cover this game and do some reports. And he'll go out and cover a basketball game for me generally if I need him. But it was just a thrill. And they had, believe it or not, they had some great games that year. Some great games, which I missed the second half of because I had to go do a radio program.
And if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you started in 92, you focused on the Housatonic League a lot. And let me ask you that, Coach. That league did away after the 93 season. They went with the SCC. Seymour left the Housatonic League. They went to the MVL. I believe North Haven, East Haven, and Brantford all split up to the point where they didn't play teams like Derby and Shelton anymore. It had to work out where maybe they play them in 2 years and then they wouldn't play them in a few. How disappointing do you think that was for the Housatonic League to, disband?
Well, without making anybody mad, let's just say it was a sad day for the Housatonic League. Because there's so many people out there now I know that are probably saying, bring back the Housatonic League day.
It was a great league.
It really was. It was a great league. Had a lot of different kind of teams in it. It was it was a lot of fun back then. So, it was when the SEC came, it certainly was the dawning of a new era, wasn't it?
And you mentioned 92, that was your first year. That was also the year where Kyle McIntosh took off as a football player. And those Cheshire teams, I mean, Steve Adazio, terrific coach. I mean, talk about Cheshire that year, how great they were, that 92 team.
Let's say I lived at the McClary Complex in Cheshire that year. Kyle McIntosh, just a super runner. And, of course, a few years later, his younger brother Ian McIntosh was great. They had a running back back then who ran with them. His name was Brian Perry. And he got little notoriety, but was an outstanding runner. And during one of the play-by-plays, I called him Flying Brian Perry. And I remember receiving a sweatshirt from, I believe, his parents, who had flying with a football picture, flying Brian Perry on it.
Right.
And I would wear that. And maybe that's when I just started giving names back then, but certainly Flying Brian. They were how can you call it, a machine back then.
Right.
In the Housatonic League. Cheshire was just.
And I mean, you could tell Adazio was going to go on to bigger things. I mean, he was just tremendous.
He was intense.
How was he to deal with? Because, when I talked to Ed Clemens and Buddy Chernowitz, they said, he cooperated, but at the same time, he wasn't a coach that would give you a lot. Like, he didn't want to give you a lot of details. Did you have any?
They nailed. No, they haven't. That's an accurate description.
Yeah.
He was intense. He was as intense a coach as I've ever seen on the sideline. I do remember, not me, but one of the people doing Cheshire game that night, our sideline reporter, got into a bit of a tiff with Mr. Adazio.
Right.
He tried to talk to him, and Steve wasn't cooperating, or maybe was doing, didn't want to talk at that time.
Right.
And I remember Bill Ganillo, again working with him and everything,
right.
Getting called in saying, what happened between this coach and that, and we had to fire off an apology when really it wasn't. It was,
right.
It wasn't either one of us. But yeah, he was tough. And some coaches are still like that. They don't always offer a lot, but for the most part, I've never run into coaches like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're usually pretty helpful because remember, I'm doing it for them. I'm doing it for their
Right.
school, their team. I'm not trying to, hurt
Right.
them.
And one of the things your team did a lot of, your crew, is just the fact that you guys would get every score of every game. I mean, like, if you wanted to know how Kennedy did against Crosby, you got the score eventually. If you wanted to know how, Brookfield did against New Milford, you got the score. I mean, talk about the team of guys you had. And you just had people volunteering, too, who would call up and give you, a score. How much effort and work did you guys put in the beginning of those years to make that happen?
When we first started, Mike, on a given Friday night, if I got 5 to 10 scores in addition to my game, we considered that a banner night.
Right.
Within the next couple of years, we got up to over 20, 25 scores. I eventually said, I want all the scores. I mean, because this is what people want to know, especially when you get near playoff time and playoff. Everybody needs to know the score because the one thing you learn is everybody wants to know a score.
Right.
And if it impacts them during playoffs, it means a lot. So eventually I got guys I'd asked to go out and cover a game who would help me out, and they did. And I had my own sons cover games, which they did. And I had a great crew, and they did it for nothing. They did it for nothing.
Right.
And I got them on the air to talk about their game. I even got to the point where I had my grandson calling a score night when he was very little, calling a Cheshire North Haven score. And he was with his dad, and he called it in. It was a lot of fun. Eventually, I to the point now, obviously years later, where people email and call me and say they will help out in any way to get all the scores. It's now we average anywhere from 35 to 40 scores.
That's crazy.
Every Friday night, and to the point where we're only missing 2 or 3. And as I say during my high school football game, or even the next day on my Saturday show, shame on you for not calling in your score, or at least getting it to somebody at the station, if you know what I mean.
And talk about this. How challenging was it for you? I mean, you put a lot of work in, so you go right from football, you're going to hockey, basketball, you're doing all these things, then you're going to softball baseball.
Spring, right.
I mean, talk about the challenge it was, because you're going from one sport that you've been focusing on for 12 weeks in football, then you got to go right into the winter sport. Was it difficult, or is it a labor of love that you just love and you never looked at it that way?
Well, being involved in sports as I am, and scheduling and stuff, that's really what it is. Years ago, though, I had there was a lot of maybe a week in between seasons. Gave me a chance to, cool down for another week and then get into basketball. And it was, at first, it was not even basketball; it was just hockey. Started with just hockey games. Basketball was added several years later, but WELI likes that too.
Right.
And then, of course, into the spring, there was a little downtime then. Right. Now, with the seasons running later, there's no downtime between the last football game on a Saturday championship and my first basketball game. Generally, it's basketball that I'll start with, and that's now maybe 2 days later, maybe on a Tuesday or Wednesday.
And the thing is, Coach, you have to do your homework. You can't just go and call a Wilbur Cross versus Hill House and not know who the players are.
Oh, no.
So you have to know, what the starting positions are, who's coming off the bench, things. So, I mean, it's so much work that you have to put in. The game is probably the easy part.
Game is the easiest part.
Right.
Wintertime, though, again, being busy because I'm doing 2 sports. And, again, you have to get all the rosters in advance, and you go over the starters, and another thing, very important, you have to know how to say the kids' names.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I will never do is go on the air without having gone over all the names with the coach before the game in any sport. In football, remember, you're talking 40, 50 kids sometimes, and I go over every name. I've had parents in past years come up to me and say, remember, my son's name is pronounced so-and-so, or my daughter's name is so-and-so. And I said, I'm all set. I said, I went over it ahead of time. So that was good. But yeah, it does mean. But again, it's just something you do. Schedules. I mean, I live for scheduling.
Right.
I live for. But again, I don't schedule the games in advance. Sometimes you do, but I try to pick the best game of the night. So I don't always know where I'm going, especially in football. You like to see who wins on a given Friday night, and then you'll pick your game after that. At the beginning of the year, you'll pick a couple games in advance because you don't know who's going to do what.
Right.
But basketball, you start out and you pick a few games, and then you start. See, in football, I always tell the coaches, if I get a chance to see your team and do one of your games in a 10-week period or 12-week period one time, consider it good because there's so many teams.
Right.
In basketball and hockey, I'll probably get to see your team more than once because there are more games. 20 games and playoffs, so I get to do that.
Right. Is there one sport that's difficult to do that you found? I mean, I would think basketball going back and forth is kind of, you really got to keep your eyes focused.
You do.
But
there are timeouts and there are foul shots, gives you a break. The sport you really got to keep up with is hockey.
Right.
Because the puck. But
they're bringing people in, too.
Yeah, but being that I'm in radio, again, if I miss a pass or here or there, nobody really knows, and it happens that fast. But as long as you basically keep up with it and follow the puck, if people can follow that puck, knowing the red line, blue lines, they're in pretty good shape.
Right. The other thing that you implemented in time was the Saturday sports show that you would do. You would do that, I believe, from 6 to 9 or 6 to 8.
Yep.
When did that start? Was it like 1999, I think, maybe 2000?
Ooh. Well, you see, before it was a Saturday morning sports show, I actually was working Saturday mornings on ELI, but it was a music show.
Right.
And then it became music semi-talk show. Right. And then they switched it to maybe sports talk around that time, And 6 to 8, a couple of hours of fun. And I wanted that basically because I think there was a need for the local sports to carry it over on the weekend and have the local coaches on and talk about their teams and everything. And that's what I try to do.
Right.
It's strictly, not that I don't talk about national sports, but I talk local. My guests are local coaches.
And, you would get every coach you could think of on that sport. How difficult is that? Because, a lot of times I would think a coach probably doesn't want to come on a Saturday morning after they've just coached the previous night, especially after a loss. One guy that I thought was really good about coming on your show, because he came on, it seemed, when his team lost a lot, was Mark Ecke, who used to coach at Cheshire. He would come on that show and he would talk to you about, I remember one game they had gotten beaten pretty bad, I believe, by Amity or Shelton, and he came on the show. I mean, how difficult is it to get them to appear on your show?
The thing is, because I book my guests in advance. You have to.
Right.
You just can't do it on a Friday night and say, hey, you want to come on. So I book them in advance, and I always tell the coach when they come on, if it's like a Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll say, remember, it's whether you win or you lose.
Right.
And that goes for basketball, hockey, any sports, whether you win or you lose. And the coaches will say, oh, yeah, I know, coach. And I know sometimes certain coaches are just not going to be thrilled on a Saturday morning. And is it easy getting up and talking about a loss after a game? I guess one of the classic stories is my good buddy Jake Paluzzi from Brantford, who came on after a loss on a Saturday morning. Again, I don't know if he's going to win or lose. I had booked him, and when I called him and he came on, I said, welcome Jake Paluzzi to the show. And he goes, Coach, Yes, Coach. Did the sun come up this morning? Yes, Jake. Is everything on? And he was just like this despondent guy who had just lost his best friend. And I'm saying, Jake, Coach, it's one game.
Right.
There's 20 games in the season. I said, you'll be just fine. And, eventually loosen up. I get him to laugh anyway. Kid around.
Right. But you basically have to be thick-skinned because you know that you might deal with some personalities whose temperatures aren't, what you want them to be. So it's challenging. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do because going in, it may not be a good interview depending on what their mood is.
Right. Well, there's actually been occasion if a coach, if I feel, does get beat, I might, especially during the winter. Can't do it during football because it's too late on a Friday night to change, your guests for Saturday morning. But if it's a basketball game and I book them in advance and I see they've lost on a Thursday, maybe and didn't play Friday, or a hockey game, I might call them and say, hey, listen, I know you got beat, you still want to come on, you want to wait, whatever you want.
Right.
And that most of the time the coaches are going to say, no, I'll come on. Other games, I don't mind.
Right.
Because we have some fun.
And you've been doing this so long and you've been so successful. Has there ever been a time where you said to yourself, you know what, I could even go further. I could take it to the next. I mean, I look at you and I see some of these hosts on FAN, and some are good and some aren't good. And I say, this guy could be on WFAN. He's that good.
That's a big thank you.
You're very
nice.
Did you ever think about that, taking it to the...
I think about that all the time. If I couldn't do that, I even, who wouldn't want to do a 2020 update, you know what I mean?
Right.
On FAN. I would, there are times I wish even here in the local area that there was a sports talk show on where I could be on an ESPN or be on a Waves and do a local, not just local, but I mean do a sports show for 3 or 4 hours, during another time.
Right.
Oh, I've thought about that a lot.
Yeah, you definitely would be great at it. Dealing with different high schools and dealing with different schools, sometimes you feel like you can never win. And I know that you've probably taken heat sometimes from, say, maybe North Haven, maybe Ansonia, maybe Shelton, whoever, because everybody wants to think that, there's a bias somewhere. Did you deal with that ever where people, gave you a hard time saying, oh, you don't like Derby, or you don't like East Haven, or you don't like Ansonia, or you don't like Brookfield, whoever it might be? I mean, do you deal with that ever where people...
Through the years, I've had to deal with it during various times. People have called the studio when I'm on the air.
Right.
And accused me of being biased. It's funny you mentioned the Valley. Ansonia certainly, and I love... People don't seem to realize that all those times where Ansonia was not getting voted number one or getting pushed back, I was the one who was pushing them because I like Ansonia.
Right.
Again, knowing Dennis Gleason all those years got me to appreciate
And you're
Ansonia.
a big Jack Hunt fan as
yes,
well.
I love Jack Hunt. I love Jack Hunt. But I remember, I believe it was on Thanksgiving morning. It might have been during a playoff game. I had a lady from Ansonia accused me of being biased, not covering Ansonia or being at this game. And I said to the lady on the air, I said, listen, I've been accused of being biased before. Am I biased toward West Haven? Well, maybe I am rooting for them a little bit because I went there. Now, you won't hear that in my play-by-play because I love all the teams. But am I in my heart rooting for them? Geez, I might be. I went there. Am I rooting for Guilford High School boys basketball team when I do my son's game? Gee, I might. He's my son.
Right.
But I give the other team their just due no matter what. I mean, I've done games where he's been beaten too, trust me.
Right.
And I said, on the air, I said, listen, if I'm ever biased, it's going to be because it's West Haven, it's my son's team, or it's my grandson's team, or any family member that's in the game.
Right.
But not in my play-by-play. Am I cheering for him in my heart? Probably.
Right.
But if that bothers you, then I suggest you take your radio and change your tuner.
The channel, right.
And which is what one man told me to say many years ago. But I said, you won't get any high school games that way, though.
Exactly. That's funny.
But I do love, and I remember one year walking on the field at Jarvis Stadium, just walking over here saying, the guys in the stand, the big Valley diehards, Coach, you're finally coming out to Ansonia. I'm saying, listen, I don't want to go through this again. I said, but if you think that I'm going to come and cover Ansonia will be, and cover a 60-0 game or 40, whatever. No, I won't say 60. That wouldn't be right. But it's just not good for the audience. It's not good. It's not going to keep my listeners. I will. But I said, do I love coming out here? I mean, when I first started covering the games, I did nothing but. I mean, Ansonia Derby was a lock every year. Ansonia Derby was a lock. Shelton Derby. I may have done Shelton Derby more. Going through my Thanksgiving Day game more than any other game ever. So I love Valley football. As I say, that's why I met my wife. I got into it.
And keep in mind, 2010, you did go up to Nolan Field and cover Ansonia Naugatuck on Thanksgiving. I believe Naugatuck. That was a good Naugatuck.
That game. Was, and they beat Ansonia that year. And I remember that crowd. It was. I can't believe the crowd there that day. And I've done Ansonia Naugatuck. In fact, as I tell my friends. There are only, to this day, and I've been in the business over 30 years, there are only 2 games in the area that I've never done on Thanksgiving Day, and hopefully before I retire, I'll get them done. There are only 2 high school games I've never done on Thanksgiving.
Really?
One is the Carini Bowl in Wallingford, Lyman Hall, Sheehan.
Really? Never done it? Wow.
Never done it.
Wow.
And I've never done Milford Foreign Law.
Really?
Never on. I've done foreign games. I've done law games. I've done the teams, but never on Thanksgiving.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
In fact, I did East Haven Brantford. My kids went to East Haven. Never did an East Haven Brantford game all during their high school years. And actually did it for the first time last year. It turned out to be a great game because it meant a playoff spot for East Haven. But there's only 2 games I've never done. Cheshire, Southington, Ansonia, Naugatuck, Derby, Shelton. Obviously, I think more than any other one. All the other games except those 2. I hope to do them before I retire.
Wow, that's crazy. Now, let me ask you this, Coach. This could be any sport, so whatever you want to talk about. Talk to me about some games that you did that stand out to you, like whether they're championship games, regular season games. Give us a couple of games that you really.
I'll give you a game which I didn't even broadcast, which was the first big game that I went to when I was just covering games. Maybe one of the. To this day, I can still remember it. It was Wilby Crosby boys basketball.
Wow.
90.
And they're tremendous basketball.
Crosby was undergoing some renovations. All the bleachers weren't even in. People were sitting on the floor, under the basket, deep in the stands, the few that were there. I was lucky enough because being from the media, I got to sit at the scorer's table and covered that game. It went double overtime. Wilby leading at halftime. Reggie O'Brien coaching then, and Nick Ogelli for Crosby. Looked like they were going to wrap this up. Crosby comes back, ties the game. It goes not 1, but 2 overtimes.
Really?
And Crosby ends up beating them 95-93 in double OT. I'll never forget the game. One of the first big games. I couldn't talk about it enough. The next day on the radio. It is a classic in my mind. One of the first big football games that I can remember is a game at the McCleary Complex in Cheshire. And it was in Amity and Cheshire. And again, Cheshire rolling along. Amity wasn't bad. Amity had a good team too. And I can remember, and I won't say, one of my buddies saying, I'm telling you tonight, Coach, Amity's going to beat them. I said, it's going to be an upset if they do. Well, lo and behold, Amity scores on the final second to last or last play of the game. Beats Cheshire at a stunned McCleary Complex. Stunned. And as I think I said, I don't believe what just happened, but the Spartans of Amity have just beaten Cheshire, and that was one of the classic football games that still sticks out in my mind. But I've had so many over the years. Even last year, when I did the North Haven New Canaan championship football game, it's going down as back and forth. Neither team stopping each other, 42-35. And as I said, I think North Haven came out of that game with more notoriety for losing than New Canaan did for winning. And their program's been on the rise anyway for so many years now. But again, every year there is.
And that's the best part for you, not having a rooting interest. You just sit back, call the action, and you get to enjoy both sides.
Yes.
You don't have to, you're not going to get down if Ansonia scores because you don't have a rooting interest. You're not going to get upset if somebody for Lyman Hall hits a big home run against Brantford or whatever, because you're just there to call the action. And I mean, it has to. I mean, you really must love to do this.
I do. I love it. I look forward to all the seasons.
Right.
I really do.
Now, let me ask you this, Coach. You've dealt with so many coaches over the years. And again, this could be any sport, football, basketball, hockey, whatever. Talk to me about some of the coaches that you've really enjoyed working with. Yeah.
Well, we can put Ed McCarthy up there for West
Right.
Haven. Ed McCarthy, maybe because as funny as he's a great speaker, by the way, and as funny
Right.
as he can be sometimes, he tells it like it is. I always like coaches that will be blunt with me and tell me this is really how it is.
Right.
And can tell me during the game, can almost tell me this is what's going to happen and this is this is how it's going to be. And I love that. I don't like coaches saying, well, I hope to be competitive. What's that? I mean,
Right.
tell me flat out. If you are going to be, it could be a long night. Last year, even in the Middletown North Haven playoff game, which I did, met Sal Morello, who's a great guy, great coach. He said to me, we're probably a year or two away, Coach. So, we're going to need a few things to happen tonight. Not that he didn't think he could win, but he knew it would be tough. I like coaches that'll be honest with me.
Don't give
and
you
tell
the,
me, in hockey. Same thing, depth. You have enough depth to stay with this team.
Right.
And some coaches will. I like coaches like that, but certainly Ed McCarthy is going to go down as. But you know what? In the SEC, they're all great coaches. I really can't say over the years. And as a matter of fact, and without naming their names, during my Saturday morning sports show, there's only been maybe 2 or 3 coaches, and I'm talking over since 99, that I did the show, that
Right.
have actually refused to come on my Saturday morning sports show.
So
That said no thanks.
that's it.
And I didn't understand why.
Right.
I said, but I'm going to be talking about your team. We're going to give your kids kudos here. And they said, no thanks.
Really?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
I mean, why would you do that? I don't know. But I've had a couple. So I said, okay, what am I going to do?
Right.
Got to respect them.
Exactly.
I do.
Now, let's talk about certain rules in high school football. And the biggest thing I don't like about this rule is I think it was one coach who kind of made them put this rule in. But talk to me about this 50-point rule that high school football implemented. Because my opinion is, Coach, how are you going to tell a sophomore in high school who's came to practice all week and he's getting in the fourth quarter and he's trying to make something happen because he's out there playing? How are you supposed to tell him, well, don't score a touchdown because we can't have this?
I'll agree with that theory. The thing is, the varsity coach has to manage the score better before that gets to happen. In other words, these coaches that go into the locker room leading 48-0 at the time.
Right.
Right? It's why did you let it get that way? In other words, now you have no wiggle room. So now when you put the JVs in, it is going to be, what do you do now? Now you got to let the other team score basically, and it does, and then the game becomes somewhat of a travesty.
Right.
I think it's just knowing how to manage the score. And as some coaches will tell me, the veteran coach say, listen, I know when the game is 7-0, the game is over. I know it then.
Right.
I know it then. I know what's going to happen. And it's up to that coach to manage and start getting filtered. Don't wait till the fourth quarter to have to do that. Get them in sooner so that it doesn't work out that way. Now, of course, with the rule change, they've done away with it, and now they're going to use this running clock now in the third and fourth quarters. And I'm not too sure about this rule either, because here's what I think could happen. The coach knows, well, let's put it this way. I can get a 50-point lead, 40-point lead, I think it's going to be your third, 40 points in the third quarter, 35 in the fourth. The clock's going to run. Well, I can get a 40-point lead in the first quarter. I know in the third quarter that clock's going to run.
Right.
Okay? And what I'm thinking is, well, I won't get anybody hurt this way. I can get my starters out. The subs go in, and it's going to be running time. That game will be over in, let's see, running time 12 minutes, 12 minutes, and 12 minutes, 24. And I've done games where the clock has run.
Right.
And you'd be surprised how fast.
It goes fast.
It goes fast.
They do it in rec basketball a lot, too. And that clock, when you're in there for those 5 minutes go quick because between foul shots and everything else. Yeah.
But you bring up a good point. If we have a rule or some kind of rule in football, why don't we have something in basketball? Exactly. Why do we still have scores in girls basketball, boys basketball, more in girls, where I see scores of 62-6 or 50-4? Why? Why do we let it get that way? Why can't coaches?
And you can't tell me some coaches in those sports aren't running up the score.
I can tell you that.
They most certainly are.
Yes, they most certainly. And I'll tell you what happens. A coach could run up a score on a school in football, and don't think when they don't play in basketball that coach says, "Well, I know what they did to us. I'll take care of them." You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's wrong.
Right.
But I mean, if a coach can learn how to manage the score, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. I mean, I coached in high school. When I coached with my son, I coached JV basketball in North Haven, and I've coached AAU basketball, and I've been on both ends. I've been leading by a lot, and I've been beaten by a lot.
Right.
And I can remember Howie Gura, who coached Shelton girls, who had some great teams.
Right.
I remember when the league got to a certain point, he'd say, "I want 10 passes." They sent me out 10 every go pass before you even think about taking a shot. 10. I mean, this way, take some time off the clock, and you don't take a shot till then. I mean, he had the right idea.
Right.
There's no sense. There's no why press and run. I mean, when you're beating up on a team.
Right.
There's no reason for it.
Do you think it's unfair though to signal out that one coach, or do you think he deserved it? That's the big thing. I mean, because he gets the most criticism, and a lot of people say he's the reason it got implemented. But I mean, I'm sure he's not the only coach who's done it. He might do it more so than everybody, but
he just I know who you're talking about, obviously.
Right.
But and I happen to know him, and I've had
he's a great coach.
I had a great coach. I've had dealings with him, great dealings. He's been on my show when he coached, and but I don't think he's the only one. Right. I think there's other coaches that, in their own little way.
And that rule has been in effect for 10 years.
Oh, absolutely.
Now. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it wasn't just put in yesterday. They've done it for 10 years. And I think a couple coaches did get suspended, correct?
Maybe a couple.
Yeah.
I mean,
do you think it's fair to suspend the head coach? Do you think he should be the one to take the hit? I mean, I guess it starts.
Who else would it be?
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
It's tricky because you don't really know. Did the coach try to do? I do agree that no team should beat somebody 70 to
Why are you trying to humiliate kids?
Yeah. That's the big problem. College and pros, that's a little different. That's scholarships. These guys are getting paid. But doing it with kids, it's a little much.
And just to show you how, I know in high school we shouldn't do this, humiliate kids. In AAU, travel ball doesn't work that way.
No.
It's you just beat a team and you don't care. I coached AAU basketball with my son for several years, and I've always told the story. There was a coach that was beating us by, I bet you was beating us by 50 points or more. Real good team from Michigan. I'll never forget it.
Right.
He actually called timeout with 99 points, with 15 seconds left in the game, and the ball. It's a true story. Can't make it up. And the ball, because he wanted to go over 100 points on us to draw up a play.
That's ridiculous.
And my girls are sitting there looking at me going, why is he doing that, coach? And I'll say, I can tell you why, and that's what happened, and that's what coaches do. Why?
Yeah,
why?
I just don't. I mean, you're not here to humiliate anybody.
Exactly.
That's the biggest thing. Talk about, you talked about your sons, but talk about some of the other guys who have been instrumental in bringing the coverage to all these games and playing a part. I mean, Nick Apria, Nick
Apria actually gave up. Nick and I taught together in East Haven, and then he gave up coach. He was an assistant coach. Gave that up and came with me in the booth and did a great job. Nick, again, outspoken. I mean, he would tell it like it is. And I liked him for that. But he certainly brought along, now back in coaching, doing a great job at O'Brien Tech. Mike Madera has been with me the last several years. He's a great sports writer for the Register and the weekly papers. I have a friend of mine who's been involved in sports, does some work at University of New Haven, Dick Graham, who covers games every Friday night for me. Mike Mentone has just gotten involved with me again, who's done work for Cable Access in East Haven. Again, I've had so many people who have just helped me,
Right. I mean, you can't do it alone. I mean, you need, you need a team of people. And I mean, these guys have really stepped up. And again, the football, you guys do that every Friday night. You also do Saturday.
Right.
But you guys also do, like I said, the other sports. You're constantly moving and moving, and I mean, every
September to June.
Yeah, every game. I mean, every game, the coverage is just tremendous.
Thank you.
It definitely is.
Very nice.
One of the things that was disappointing, and thank God they finally came to their senses, but when they moved you guys out of WELI and put you to 1300, I felt like the high school coverage lost a little bit of its.
You remember that, huh?
Oh, yeah, I definitely do, because a lot of times the Yankee game was on there, and you couldn't listen to the games.
Now, of course, and we have games on both stations now,
right.
But it's not quite the same as it was then, Mike, because now there's no excuse not to be able to hear the game because we're on iHeartRadio. Yeah. You can download WELI and ESPN Radio 1300 on your iHeart phone, so you can listen to it on your phone. It's on the internet now. So you can listen to the game, which, by the way, sounds great when you ever listen to a game on a computer, by the way.
Right. Oh, yeah. Because
so
you're not
now,
getting the static.
Yeah, now there's not as many reasons not, you know what I mean? Before, was there a reason to be somewhat concerned? Yeah, I was when they moved it, and of course it didn't last very, only lasted
2 years.
2 years, then we moved it back because I had somebody at the radio station in my corner who fought for me, and between the two of us, we got it back TLI. But again, even for this coming season, the first 4 games are going to be on 1300 because the Yankees are playing.
Right.
So we'll be.
Yeah, now talk about the Friday night games are unbelievable, but the Saturday games, you did a lot of coverage to the, prep schools.
Yep, I did Hamden Hall.
Hamden Hall. And, I remember when Ron Carbone came there and coached, that was a lot of fun. How enjoyable was to come to a Saturday game 10:30 in the morning or 1:30 in the afternoon?
I love Saturday football.
Right.
I miss Saturday football games. I loved them in the morning. I loved them in the afternoon. Still love them. I don't really get a chance to do Saturday games now because, we have Yale football on ABZ. We have UConn football on ELI, so it's a little tough to get them on. But I have to tell you, I miss them immensely. Now, Hamden Hall, I started because my doctor is on the board of trustees at Hamden Hall and asked me to do a game one time, and he wanted me to do the Hamden Hall Hopkins game, obviously, arch rival. We got them on. So I did them for several years, started doing all their games on Saturday, and they have a beautiful, they didn't have a beautiful facility then, they got it now. There was not even a press box there on the field. I actually did the first few games, if you can believe this, on a scaffold.
Really?
On a scaffold, which on windy days would make it rather tense, but I actually did a game with the wind one day, the rain blowing. I'm in the top of a scaffold, getting blown all over the place, and then they eventually built a brand new press box at Hamden Hall.
Right.
And I did games in there. And my doc said, we built it for you because you're doing all our games. Oh, I enjoyed them immensely.
Oh, yeah. Those
and
were a lot
Joe
of fun.
Linta, of course, coaching
I learned a lot about Hamden Hall just by you guys doing the games. Let me ask you this. You said you love Saturday games.
I do.
Were you not a fan of the lights when they first came out and teams were playing on Friday nights?
No, I didn't mind the lights. But I just enjoy. Actually, I would like, if it were up to me and I could do it, I would do a Friday night game and a Saturday game.
Right.
If it were up to me, I would do it that way because I love Saturday games. I didn't want to lose those. But again, Friday night, you get, on a Friday, when you get up, you go to the station, you do your day, and you really get pumped up all day long. Just thinking about, going to be a big crowd tonight, going to be a big Friday night game. I get pumped up.
Right. And one of the things I like that you did is when it was halftime, you stepped aside from the mic and you allowed your team to do the halftime show.
My son did halftime for many years.
Right, and you would get certain guests on. I remember a few years back, I think you guys had Luke Richmond on, a former player.
Luke,
and you guys get like different guests. And it makes the halftime go by quick because you're just like listening to an interview.
My voice after a Friday night game, you're on talking for 4 hours between pre and post game, gets a little tired. Then you do a Saturday show, and if you've gotten excited, it can be tough Saturdays. But my son did halftime for me. I do halftime now because I haven't really kicked it over. But if I asked Mike Madera and Chris Esposito, who also, by the way, is on my crew every Friday night doing stats, taking pictures, and Brian Goralnik, who has been hired by the station, now does all my video. When we started during softball, we started our Facebook Live, where you were actually taking video of the softball game and posting it on our Facebook page. I mean, the views and the hits we're getting was just, like my boss said, we're blowing it up. It was just great. We're going to do that again in all the sports, but with Brian there, they could easily now do a halftime show for me and do it. And I actually don't mind. I actually wish I'll probably do more of that because I do want halftime off.
Right.
I want to take a little break. Absolutely.
Right. Now, you've had to change with the times. High school sports have changed. Every decade they do.
Right.
Do you still enjoy it as much as you did 30 years ago when you first started? Do you still get? A lot of rules have changed in different sports. I know in football, I don't think you can do contact if you have a bye week. You can, You can practice.
You have to have a mandatory bye week now, of course.
Right. There's been different things. You're seeing now in softball, a lot of the pitchers are wearing that face guard to protect themselves.
Third baseman wear them, first baseman.
Do you like these changes? Do you think they're necessary? What do you think about some of the things that have been put into?
When rules come along, some I agree with, some I don't.
Right.
But for the most part, they don't bother me. I get as pumped up now going to a high school football game on a Friday night or a basketball game on a Tuesday night or Friday night and a hockey game. There's nothing better than high school hockey when you get to the state tournament.
Right.
And I do the semifinals and championships at the Ingalls Rink at Yale, and the people are 7-8 deep around the rink.
Right.
There's nothing better than that.
Oh,
There's nothing better than that.
I could imagine.
Oh, there's nothing better than that.
Definitely. Now, let's talk about, we talked about coaches a little bit. What are some of the players, and this is any sport, like I said, softball, it could be anything. What are some of the players that you saw play that stand out to you?
One of the first players I ever saw before I even got into broadcasting play, and actually never got a chance to broadcast one of his games, but loved him dearly, still talk to him, is Rico Brogna.
Yes.
Rico Brogna was one of my first athletes that I ever covered, went to a lot of his games at Watertown.
You were at that Ansonia Watertown game.
I was at the Ansonia Watertown game.
Buddy interviewed you at the half.
Yep.
Yes.
I've stayed friends with him. He's been on my show. And to this day, he always told me, he said, he called me when Clemson called him about giving him the scholarship there, or he had a chance to go to the Detroit Tigers in their farm system. And he said, Coach, I'm calling you because I value your opinion. I said, Rico, I appreciate that. I said, let me put it this way. I said, my opinion is you'll probably have a longer career in baseball. And two, there won't be any linebackers hitting you if you play baseball. And he was laughing, and he ended up going with the Tigers. And I went up to see him play when he went to Pawtucket, when he played with the Detroit Tigers farm system. And I actually went on vacation one year in Pennsylvania and went to Reading when he was coming up with the team. They were playing the Reading Phillies. I actually went to see him.
Right.
He was coaching first base at the time, and I stopped and talked. Just one of the first guys that I ever.
Very underrated.
He was a great first baseman. If he didn't have back problems, he
hit over 20 home runs at least 6 times in his career. He was very good. It was, and it was funny because in high school, he was a great baseball player, but he was a phenomenal quarterback for Watertown. So a lot of people thought he was going to go play college football, and he had a great baseball career. He played with the Tigers, Mets, and Phillies. But
what about his football? His football, the kicker that he was, still has one of the longest kicks. I believe it's like 5th now. But the first game I ever saw him play was at Naugatuck. I'm sitting on the Naugatuck side just watching the game, and these people are going, this kid's going to try what, a 45-yard field? He ain't never going to kick that. Right. When they saw the ball go through the uprights, they said, oh, my goodness. And just, what a kicker. I enjoyed watching him play. He probably was the first one that got me going. You mentioned the Cheshire teams of the 90s with the running back, the McIntoshes. He certainly was one of the guys that
There was the kid Ortiz for Crosby in the 90s. He
absolutely.
was very good.
And Phil Lott, too, who played at Wilby, too, back then.
Of course, Stephen Coughlin.
Right. And in New Haven area, of course, so many players from Wilbercross that I got to see. And Hillhouse, I watched Hillhouse and Cross play since I was a little kid, play their basketball games at Payne Whitney when they used to play their games at Payne Whitney.
That rivalry is
one of the best. One of the best.
It really is. When they get together, it's intense, and it's intense in every sport. I mean,
but that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
It is that intense.
Yeah.
I actually love it.
You know, what do you think? You know, we're talking about rivalries. The Ansonia Derby one was a great one, but it's kind of really not the same rivalry anymore.
Correct.
Why do you think that happened? Do you think them not playing those 6 years killed it, or do you think it was, you know, Derby went through some down years? Do you think that hurt?
I think it was both. I think the fact they didn't play, which when you don't play for a while, people start to lose that, and it's tough to get something back. You know what I mean? But let's face it. I mean, as I said, I did so many Ansonia Derby games, and I'll never forget my first one where the game was a 10:30 game because Derby always played Saturday morning games, and Ansonia always played Saturday afternoon games.
Yeah.
And when I got to the game, I got there, you know, about 9 o'clock, and someone had told me, one of my buddies said, listen, you better get there early because there's going to be packed. And here I am at Ryan Field in Derby going, there are people sitting here in the bleachers already, having coffee, tailgating.
Yeah.
I'm saying, are you kidding me? And if that doesn't get you pumped up, nothing's going to get you pumped up. And that's a big rivalry. But I think the fact that Ansonia really took off, I think Derby went through some tough times. Let's face it, they're a small school.
Right.
And I know numbers have sometimes been a problem. But I'll tell you what, nobody fight. I mean, walking up those stairs at Ryan Field into their clubhouse room up there, you know, above the concession stand in Derby. I mean, I got a chance to do that. And I'll tell you what, to do that is something
special. One of the
special.
best games you called for Derby Ansonia was 1996. It was an overtime win for Derby. Again, you know, Luke Richmond was Ansonia's quarterback. Derby pulled off the upset.
They did.
That was a classic game, and I just remember you seemed drained after that game. Like your voice was pretty much gone after that.
A lot of times, like I say, after a football game on a Friday night where you're working and doing pre and post game and getting post games and all my sponsors, and I'm usually done after Friday night. You know, basketball again with the timeouts. Not after a hockey game. Only because a hockey game may only be a couple hours, but it's nonstop. It's not like TV where you have TV timeouts. So I'm usually drained after a hockey game as well. And softball, again, with the timeouts and between innings and stuff. But I love calling one as much as the other.
Right.
You know?
Were there any state championship games, baseball, hockey, basketball, football, that stand out to you? Because, you know, football always seems to dominate a lot of things, but there were some great baseball championships over the years that, you know, Bob Kello winning that first state title was special. I mean, but there's been so many great championships in the different
sports. For me, it would be softball, Mike, because I did softball championships. I can remember Southington winning so many state championships. They beat Holy Cross of Waterbury one year, 1-0. On an unearned run in the first inning,
and
Southington
crazy.
Made it stand up, and it was just disheartening, you know, 1-0, and to lose a game like that. A lot of Southington games. I did many big games at West Haven. Certainly, Amity over the last several years have played some big games. I did the Seymour game with East Haven a couple of years ago, a 2-1 game, which was just tremendous. East Haven a couple of years ago, winning the state championship, the first one under Ed Crisafi, beating a Waterford team that came in, or Fisher that came in, just, you know, hands down, this was the team to beat. And
for that school, it was nice to see because they haven't had a lot of success over the last several years. So for them to get a championship, it was nice, and to almost, you know,
and being that I taught in the system for 20 years, for 19 years, it was nice. So there've been so many games, you know, in hockey, as I say, the Hamden games and some of the games with Fairfield Prep and Darien, who've been played so many times. Fairfield Prep and Hamden have played so many great games. And as I say, at the Ingalls Ring, it really doesn't matter because when you get, and I'll be honest with you, the Division II games over the last several years and Division III games have been probably better than the Division I games. Amity's won some championships the last several years that have been tremendous.
Oh, yeah, tremendous. Definitely. I mean, just that's what I wanted to ask you next is, would you say high school sports is number one for you and college pros is second and third? I mean,
it's not even a contest.
Right, so it's definitely high school.
High school is number one. College is there.
Right.
Is right there. And trust me, to go to the Yale games, like we carry Yale on our station, and going to UConn, et cetera. And I love local college football. I love Southern Connecticut. Since I went there, I love going to their games, and my wife and I still go to Southern games. University of New Haven, we have so many great schools in our area in the various sports, whether it be basketball. Look at Quinnipiac, what they've done in hockey. Are you kidding me?
That's unbelievable.
I mean, Ram Peckno's got a dynasty going there.
Right.
And it's so great. We don't have to go out of state to see great college sports. We got them right here in Connecticut. That's what I like.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, it really is. Tell me this, Coach. In the 32 years that you've been doing this, what has been the most rewarding thing for you personally?
Wow. I guess seeing all the kids that I've had a chance to see at the various games, and for them to come up to me or the coach after the game, and maybe because it was the girls that I started covering before anybody, doing softball games and girls basketball games like I do now. To have an athlete come up to me or a player after the game and say, Coach, thanks for coming. And when the coach says that to me or a player, it makes my whole night. Thanks for coming. Thanks for thinking about us.
Because, I mean, that to me is
That does it. I mean, all the accolades that I've gotten, obviously I've loved every one of them. I guess if you ask me about that, the biggest highlight I got was maybe a couple of years ago being elected to inducted into the Connecticut Coaches High School
That was a big
Hall
honor.
of Fame. Which
Definitely was.
I was, if there was ever a time that working in radio or having to talk all the time that I was speechless, it was that. Because to go up to Rentschler Field and get honored between games and then going to the dinner and getting to be inducted and looking at the hall, which is up at Rentschler Field, and to see all the names in the media wing that you're in with, it was mind-boggling. Right. I wear the ring when I wear my ring. I get a beautiful ring, very proudly. But that's great, and I'm glad because I'm glad they recognize what I've tried to do for all these 30 years. But to see the kids, and being a teacher for 19 years and knowing kids in the classroom, and to see them later on, and the kids are so great. I remember a football player one night in Hamden, never forget it. Knowing that I give away Hummel hot dogs every game and hamburgers, he said, "Hey, Coach, he goes, I want to win the hot dog award tonight." I said, "Go get it, kid," and whatever. It's funny, but the kids are so nice. I've met so many great kids.
Right. Well, Coach, this was a lot of fun, and I just want to tell you that as a fan, somebody that played high school sports and what you've done for high school sports, for football, for basketball, for hockey, for softball, for baseball, for college football, Yale, UConn. I mean, all the work that you, Matt, Jeff, Nick, I'm leaving out some names and I do apologize, but all the work that you guys put in to make high school sports what it is, to give it recognition when it wasn't getting it, to me, I can't thank you enough, and I really think what you did was remarkable.
Thank you. You're very nice. Those are kind words. Thank you. And maybe because I wanted more of it when I was playing and wish we had gotten more for the great teams that were around and got a chance to do it for the other kids. Maybe that's why. But thank you. You're very nice.
Well, thank you, Coach. And Wally, I want to thank you for being patient.
Yeah,
it was nice having you here for these shows, and I really do appreciate it. So there you have it, folks. It began in 1983 at an FM station called KC 101. Years later, he took it a step further and went to WELI and brought you some of the best high school football games, basketball games, hockey games, baseball, softball. The list goes on and on. Coach George Demaio was never about Coach George Demaio. He was always about the 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids who played these games. What he wanted to do, what his team wanted to do, was give these kids some recognition and give them a platform where they could be recognized for all their great accomplishments. It can never go unnoticed, the work that Coach George Demaio did to make high school sports as popular as it is today. When you look back at everything, legend, champion, hero, you could dust off those words for Coach George Demaio. I'm Mike Cannici for Hometown Heroes saying, good night, everyone.